Hi, I'm Thomas Mohbat, and I am the owner and an engineer producer here at ALOHA Music Recording Studios in Hilo, Hawaii. And I'm here today to talk about my preamp, the Universal Audio 610 Mark II. Universal Audio started in the 50s. It was founded by a gentleman named Bill Putnam. He liked to tinker and design devices to help him record broadcasts, radio, and early television. He was the guy that came up with the 610 preamp, which is this little guy right here. Bill Putnam designed this the 610 preamp in 1958, but his sons introduced this unit in 1999. They started remaking the unit in a more modern chassis, and they've kept some of the old features, but they've made it a more modern type of device now.
Looks like they've combined a couple of devices into one.
Yes, they sure did. They're giving you the 610 preamp on this side here, and they're also offering you a compressor, a T4 optical compressor on this side. It's a mono unit that records from left to right, so you dial in your tone, your volume with your preamp over here. You can EQ it if you like right there, high or low, very simple. And then add a little bit of compression on this side to control your dynamics, keep things from jumping out of hand. And
so before they would have been two separate devices.
Yeah, exactly. They were two different devices. This was a 610. This was its own device. They actually originally they had these in a console with about, I believe, about 16 or 18 different modules. So there were that many of these knobs. They used knobs instead of faders back then. So that's how early that was, yeah. So you'd see a console with 16 of these. There was not even any compressor built into that console. That would have been an outboard unit. They're combining them here to give it all in one signal, which is a real nice, easy workflow for me.
Save you some space on the rack.
Yeah, definitely. They're packing about 5 tubes in each of these. It gets nice and warm. It's very well made, solid made. The new meter is a little bit different. It's a little bit larger, and they use a LED light in there, so you don't have to change that light bulb every time it blows out. I got to check on this little blue light here. I think that might be just a 9-volt bulb, but it might be an LED in there. Anyway, real nice little.
Does it require a fan?
Nope, no fan. I always try to leave a little bit of airflow between units so air can blow through there, and you know, they do get very warm, but that's how they operate. That's a good sign. That means the unit is nice and warmed up, and you're getting the tone that you want. You've got to turn these on for about 5 minutes before you actually use them. You want to let the unit warm up a little bit. It'll work right away when you first turn it on, but if you wait 5 minutes, you're going to get a better tone once those tubes have warmed up.
Great.
So yeah.
So probably bands from the 50s and 60s, late 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on were using these things.
Oh yeah, a lot of famous recording artists have used the LA-610, notably Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, Sarah Vaughan in some of the early recordings, and then after that Ray Charles, Johnny Cash was using it.
Beach Boys. Beach
Boys made it famous, yeah, on their Pet Sounds albums, and yeah, they were getting those great vocal sounds through that.
All the big studios had that.
It was the way to go, yeah. The microphone we discussed earlier, the Neumann U87 or the U47 were big microphones.
Would have been fed into
this. They fed that into there to get that tone that Frank Sinatra made so famous. So did Nat King Cole. He was amazing. More recently, you know, Van Halen. You know, I mean, a lot of artists have used this, but Van Halen notably was a great fan.
So it's quite a combination.
Yeah, it's a monster combination. Bill Putnam left Chicago and moved to California, LA, to get away from the Chicago winters. He also was going out there because Frank Sinatra was relocating out there. Frank wanted to be closer to Hollywood and all the movies and the studios in LA at that time, which is really kind of California's, LA's golden years, if you ask me, for that kind of thing. Hollywood, it was huge, and the studios there were a little different than New York studios and certainly Chicago studios.
Built the Capitol Records building and that
studio. Bill Putnam went out there for just that. He went out there to be a part of that scene and follow Frank, and also to build his own studios. When he got out there, he realized there were some deficiencies in some of the local studios that Frank Sinatra was recording in, and so he developed his own studio, United Western Studios in I'm not sure what neighborhood that was in, but in California and in LA, I mean. And he was the first guy to go in and say, hey, let's get this singer away from the orchestra. And before that, people would have the big orchestra right behind the singer. Of course, that microphone that the singer's singing in is also getting all kinds of the band into it. So there's a lot of bleed. And Bill Putnam was the first guy to say, hey, let's build him a little booth. You know, let's put him in this room separate from the band so we can just focus on the quality of the vocal.
So you don't get all of that cross.
Yeah, that bleed. Yeah, it was probably a lot, especially on a big open mic like the U47. It's capturing a lot. So anyway, so Bill Putnam was really the first guy to do a vocal booth. He came up with that. Yeah, he was a genius, and also helped develop the first multi-band equalizer. So yeah, he was way ahead of the game. You know, doing stuff, pioneer stuff before anybody even thought about this. So anyway, that's what he went out. Some of his, I think his studio, United Western, is still, the building is still there. The studio is still open for business. I believe it's now called Ocean Way Studios in LA, and you can go there. You can record there still using some of the vintage gear. They've even kept the rooms looking the same. They've kept the vintage vibe and mostly the original acoustic absorption in the room. They've kept it all intact. Really cool looking studio if you want to look at Ocean Way Studios online, and amazing place. As well as Capitol Records. Everybody's familiar with the Capitol Records building as being their office. It looks like a stack of records. Yeah. But a lot of people don't know that there's a recording studio there, and it's a very famous studio. It's still in business as well. A little bit of a different story there, but yeah, his two sons, Bill Putnam's sons, refounded Universal Audio in 1999. They opened with the commitment to provide this classic old gear. They wanted to rebuild it and put it out there so that modern engineers could use it again. A lot of the old equipment was worn down, hard to find, and expensive. So to purchase and to operate. So there's a big demand for it. Yeah, and they said let's put this great old gear out, give it some modern technology. Let's modernize it a little bit, but still keep that vintage look and that vintage sound that everybody fell in love with. They realized there was demand for it, and they met that demand with this company. Not just this device, but several other devices.
Where are they made?
Scotts Valley, California. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but Scotts Valley, California.
Sounds like it's in Northern California.
Okay, I'll check on that. But and yeah, in addition to making reissuing the hardware gear, they've also decided that they were going to put out digital versions, plugins of all of their gear as well. Very high quality plugins that you can purchase for a fraction of the cost of the hardware unit. You can
get plugins of that hardware.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. You all you have to do is purchase one of their. You probably can't see it down here in my rack, but one of their Apollo units are their digital converters. They convert the microphone signal to a digital signal that you can record into your computer. So this goes between your microphone and your computer. That's the conversion. Once you purchase that unit, there's several to choose from 1 or 2 tracks, all the way you can get multi-track systems, a 4 or an 8 or even a 16 input system. Once you purchase any one of those units, depending on your needs, you have access to their plugin library for purchase. You can purchase their plugins, and all of a sudden you're able to get units like this, the 610 preamplifier. You can get compressors like the LA-2A compressor. Another famous one they use is the Universal Audio 1176. It's a famous compressor that's used in studios all around. You can get plug-in versions of that right on your screen and learn how they operate and get that same tone in your recording.
So you get those effects right in the box, or right to your before you mix it even.
Yeah. You're recording these as part of your input signal. So your microphone plugs into the converter, and right away you're going to your plug-in. So you're going to get the tone of the plug-in before it actually is even recorded into your computer, which is the secret sauce right there. You want to get that on recording as opposed to applying it as a plug-in in your mix down, which is where most guys drop their plug-ins when you're mixing down. This is going to capture that vintage, warm analog tone on recording. And the nice thing about it is once you purchased one of them, you can have several of the same device. So that's one of the greatest things. Not to mention the cost, being able to for about a tenth of the price of the hardware unit, you can get a plug-in. I've got some here. I'll show you now if you want.
Yeah, we're talking about the plugins that come as a package with the UA.
Yeah, the Universal Audio plug-in package includes both of these nice preamps. This is on the left. This is the 610A, the original preamp that Bill designed back in 1958. That's the original unit. And then a more modernized version of that over here on the right. This is 610B, which has a few more features and more closely emulates the 610 Mark II hardware that I have right here. This is more like the 610B. It's got some of the same, actually it has the exact same EQ settings that the hardware device does. If you look at it, you've got the same selections here, the frequency selections here as that on the hardware unit. You also have the exact same low and high attenuators here.
So you can match the mics.
Yeah, they've really done a great job. I mean, using these two, the hardware unit and the plug-in, it's really hard to tell the difference. They're so close, and it's really nice to have a second, being able to put a second microphone without the expense of having to purchase two of these, because they are expensive. They're under $2,000 for a hardware device. I believe this hardware package, depending on the sale that Universal Audio offers, they're between $150 and $250 for the pair of these. And
for the plugins.
Yeah, they have an annual sale where they drop the price by 50%. I'm always looking for that. Wow. So it's a great time to pick up their plugins when they're on sale, a semi-annual sale, very hard to tell the difference between the plug-in versions and the hardware devices. The switches are all exactly the same. You've got the phase in-out switch right here, the pad switch, just like on the hardware unit, and you've got the impedance switch right here, which, depending on what type of microphone you're using, or line, you switch that to line if you're plugged in directly into it. Which you can do on the Apollo unit. You can plug your bass or guitar, you can plug straight into the Apollo 1/4-inch input on the front of the unit, and you're going straight to the preamp, just like if you're plugging into the original hardware. So really nice feature right there, especially for people recording at home. You don't have to set up an amp or anything. You're plugging right into the 610, which is like plugging into that.
Wow. Yeah,
really nice. I have a soft spot for the 610A, which is why I purchased the plug-in package. The 610B comes with the Apollo unit. When you purchase the Apollo unit, it comes with a starter kit of plug-ins, a really nice one, including the 610B. But if you want to get the 610A, the original one that Bill designed, you got to buy the bundle. That's the only way to get it. I don't even think they sell this one separately. But you get the bundle together, and you've got the 610A. It's just really nice. It's a super simple one knob kind of approach. You plug into it, you plug your mic or your line into it, and just go right for the big knob and crank that up, and you're getting nice. It has a really sweet, buttery mojo to it, a really great tone. If you want to go into some of the settings, you can. You can adjust the high-low up at the top here. You've got some really basic EQ settings, much more simple than the 610B. Just a fixed high and low frequency, and you can raise it or lower it. The same, you've got a mic line switch here. It's even more simplified. A pad and a phase, just like on this one, a little different. But mainly, I just go right for that big knob. I don't even mess with the other stuff too much. I crank that up, and it sounds a little different. The 610B is a little more clinical, just a little bit. I don't want to scare people off, but that's got a great tone. This has got even more of that great tone. So if you want to really explore that option, get the package, and you'll get the best of both worlds. Depending on what you're doing, you can choose one, or you can have them both going. That's the nice thing about the plugins, is you can have two microphones, one going to each of them, or you can switch back and forth very quickly between them. You can audition them without too much problem.
Super. To match the 610A or B and get a compressor like you have on the hardware, how does that work?
Oh, okay, good question. Because the hardware unit has the built-in compressor, which is an LA-2A style optical compressor built right into the hardware unit. These plugins do not have a compressor built in them. It's just the preamp. So if you want to add a compressor, you have to open up another channel. If you go right down below here, you've got, in addition to the preamp selection, which is the first knob, you can go down here. You've got 4 little slots where you can open up other plugins. And what I frequently do is open up a compressor on one of those channels.
Okay.
And I can do that right here. Boom, I've got one ready. This is the Teletronix LA-2A, which is a classic, very well-known hardware compressor that Universal Audio is emulating here with their plug-in. And it is spot on. Boy, they've really nailed it. I think this is the first plug-in they did, I'm pretty sure, that Universal Audio did.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they've really copied. I mean, the original unit is a beast. It's about this big. It takes up like 3 or 4 or even 5 rack mount spaces. It's a big thing. Very expensive. And this, you just drop it into your plug-in chain, and this is coming in after your preamp. You know, whichever preamp you're using, that's your first signal. Then it's going into your LA-2A, and you're going to be capturing that sound right into your recorder. It's adding it just like you would if you had the hardware devices and were recording your microphone straight through those 2 devices.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really simple compressor to operate. It's not a modern compressor. It's a little bit slow on the attack, so it lets a lot of those that first signal to come through. But it's great on slower instruments like human voice or cellos, horns, things with a slower attack. This really just sounds great. Super easy to use, like I always like. You just turn up the first thing you do is just reach for that peak reduction and crank that up, and that's going to give you more compression right there. Very simple. There's nothing else to worry about. And then this is just your volume, your gain right here. Easy as that.
It's great for voices.
Yeah, great on voices. Great on that 47 mic we've talked about earlier. If you plug that 47 through either one of these preamps and into that, you're getting a classic sound, you know, without breaking the bank. Great for guys that are just starting out, that might not be able to afford the hardware unit just yet. It's a great way to start. Get your Apollo unit, whatever you can afford, and then start collecting some of these plugins. I wouldn't recommend buying a lot of plugins. You're better off just starting with 1 or 2 and really getting to know them well.
Learn them.
Yeah, don't go out and buy, spend all your money on a big, 10 or 20 plugins. I know some guys that want to have them all. There's 100 of them. Don't do that. Buy one, master it. Really read about it, learn about the history of it, like I have, and get going with it. Get a singer in there or a musician, and or you can do it yourself, but start playing with it. Start playing with the settings, record with it, practice. you know, what's the expression? Master of, what is that? I'm asking the wrong guy. We'll cut that out. Never mind. Yeah, just get comfortable with your plugins. Get to know. Like I've just got 3 of them open right here. You can do so much with just that. You know, a couple of preamps and a good compressor like that. You can really get some great recordings.
Beautiful.
Yeah. This compressor was actually one of the first compressors ever made. They didn't even call it a compressor back when it was made. They called this a leveling amplifier. And this was designed to help radio engineers get a control over fluctuating volume levels from different microphones. So they'd have different people coming in and interviews, speaking, or they would have maybe somebody singing. And you know, those are all, they'd have one microphone and those levels were all over the map.
The loudness control.
Yeah, so they came up with this to help keep signals under control. You apply a little bit of compression, it squishes everything down to a manageable level, and then you can adjust your broadcast level right there. They weren't recording these were going out right on the air, probably AM. And so they had, you know, they didn't get a chance to edit or correct it after the fact. They had to get it. They were broadcasting. So this was a really simple device to keep those levels consistent, because you want your announcer to be loud. Basically, you want him to be loud and crisp and clear and coming through on that radio dial. So that's the LA-2A plugin from Universal Audio. All right. This is the Neve 1073 preamp. It's a famous preamp made back in the 70s by a gentleman named Rupert Neve, N-E-V-E. He designed this to be used in a very early console, not quite as early as the Universal Audio consoles, but he designed this for a console. I think it was the Wessex A88, I believe was the name of the console. And they hired Rupert, who was famous for his radio transistors. He was building transistors for radio broadcast. I think he started that company, Neve Electronics, I believe, in 1961 out of England. He's a British. He started designing these transistors out of his home, which was in England. It looks like a castle. They really had a beautiful house, and he was making these out. All of his different rooms and bedrooms were converted into design, yeah. So he was commissioned by Wessex to help build their recording console, and specifically the preamp and the EQ, the multi-band EQ. For that console. Again, you'll see a modular console where each of these was on one of the channels. So there might have been 8 or 16 different channels in that console. The 1073 was a transistor preamp as opposed to the 610 that we've been talking about, which is a tube preamp. Transistors kind of started making their heyday in the late 60s and the 70s. Because they didn't have to have tubes that you had to change. It didn't get as hot and it wasn't as heavy. It was just a lot more portable, easy to change out. So transistors started making their way into the recording chain.
More compact.
Yeah, more compact. This whole unit that we're seeing here is actually about that size, maybe a little bit larger. But engineers started, in the 70s, they started realizing they could pull these modules out of the console, out of the multi-channel console, and use them as basically very early channel strips. That is, you had everything you need right in one little unit to record. You could run a mic straight into it, adjust your preamp either for a microphone or for a line. Down here you have to get the line settings, and right up there you've got your volume control. Rupert Neve also added a very simple and easy to operate 3-band equalization. Here having a nice, sweet, silky top end. Boy, you turn that up, it just had some real nice sheen to your signal. In the middle, in the original, the high was fixed. You could not adjust it. they've emulated that here in some of the more modern versions of this. You can adjust what frequency you're changing there. But this, I believe this is fixed at 12K, I believe. In the middle, you have your EQ, which is adjustable. You can adjust the frequency that you want to work on, and then raise or lower that with this knob. It's kind of these knobs are a little tricky to get used to. They've got an outer knob, which is your frequency level, and you adjust that out here. And in the middle, you adjust your volume, your attenuation. So you got to play with that a little bit. You find your frequency here, and then you can boost it right there or cut it. Very, very musical sounding. All of these EQ settings are frequencies that Mr. Neve selected as being very usable and very musical. So you don't have to, not a lot of guesswork there. You can kind of click it on to, yeah, and find the range you want to work on, and boom. Down here you have a low, which is basically the same. You've got the volume adjustment here, and then the frequency settings there. Even fewer. I think there's just four settings there, and an off switch. Rupert sadly died just in 2021. A lot of people missed that last year with COVID and all, but Rupert left us, and but his company carries on. He was doing stuff right up until last year. They were putting out hardware devices. I think his Shelford EQ, and I think that was the last device he was working on right before his death. So he was going right up to the very end. The guy was, I think he was 91 or 93, still in there with, with the engineers making these devices. Yeah, he moved from England. He fell in love with Texas, and he moved down to Texas. He and his wife moved down there. He just loved the rolling hills and the Texas vibe. Unusual, right? Yeah. I mean, you'd think a Brit wouldn't fit in Texas, but he opened up shop down there, and their company is still putting out great devices. You can still buy the original 1073s in a rack mount. All of their stuff is still great. A little bit on the pricey side. Very expensive gear. Not stuff that I could really afford right now. That's why I love the plugins. You can pick up the 1073 for, I think, from Universal Audio for maybe about $100, $150. You can have your own 1073. You can have 10 of them, on each channel. However, super nice to pick up if you're looking for something that's a little different than the tube sound of the 610s. Grab yourself a 1073, and that is a transistor-based preamp. The list of musicians and artists that worked with the 1073 in the late 60s and 70s is a mile long. It was used in countless studios all over the world. They called this the British sound, or they also called this unit the British iron, because it was such a heavy piece of equipment. It's really, you can't tell from the plug-in, but it was a solid block of equipment. British iron, or the British sound, and that was the tone they were looking for, is that famous 1073 preamp with that 3 bands of EQ. Very much a desert island preamp, described as having a very colored tone, big fat bottom end, silky highs, powerful mids, but you can't make it sound bad. No matter how much you crank it, that's what made it so versatile. So you could a lot of EQs, they're fine, but then you really start pushing them, they break up. This was not one of them. This one you can really push stuff all the way, and it's going to sound great. That's why guys loved it so much, because it's really pretty idiot proof. Once you kind of figure out the basics of how it operates. So super easy to operate. Again, this preamp doesn't have any kind of dynamics control. It doesn't have any kind of built-in compression like we talked about over here with the 610 Mark II. But again, with the Universal Audio Apollo purchase, you can get your plugins to put in right after the preamp. So you could pull up a nice, here's one. You could pull up, this is the classic Universal Audio 1176. This was made by Universal Audio, obviously, and this is probably my favorite compressor ever. Used in studios all around the world. Countless artists, they go to this time and time again because it's so easy to operate, and it just sounds great. It's really set it and forget it. You just set your input right here, and that determines how much of the signal is getting compressed. So the more compression you want, you just crank the input, and then you can pull back your output here if it's getting too hot, or push it a little bit more if you want more output. You've got some attack and release settings right here, which makes it a little bit more versatile and modern than the LA-2A, which I described. This has got a little more control. You've got that attack and that release. It also has these buttons here, which are famous for being able to adjust the ratio. You've got 4:1, 8:1, 12:1, and 20:1 for a very extreme setting. The 4:1 and the 8:1 are like a compression level. The 12 and the 20 are going to be more like a limiter. This module was made famous because engineers realized you could press all the buttons at once. You could just kind of use 4 fingers and press them all for a very extreme kind of nuke it setting. You know, you could really just crush the heck out of it. They've allowed you to do that here. I think with the shift key, you can actually do that now. You can press all buttons in like that. Anyway, and then undo that. But anyway, that's your ratio setting. On this side, you have the gain reduction, which is where I usually leave it. You also have a off or a bypass switch down at the bottom, and 2 different monitor modes, level modes for your VU. I usually almost just leave it on the gain reduction setting. When that meter starts going back, that's showing you how much it's reducing the signal. So if it starts going way down like that to the left, it means you're crushing it quite a bit. You kind of want that needle to kind of bounce back and forth in the middle there, unless you want something more extreme.
Very nice.
Yep, again, Universal Audio knocking it out of the ballpark with the 1176. Sounds to my ear, I've worked with 1176s before, and they have really nailed it with this EQ. This is a more recent update to their original release. This one they've really nailed it to the wall with the sound of this EQ. And that's a very nice little combination right there. A little bit more modern 70s sound as opposed to the early 50s and 60s sound of the 610 and the LA-2A. This is going to be the 1073 with the 1176. A beautiful combination right there.
Nice.
Yeah.